Good evening. I'm Senator Tim Scott from the great state of South Carolina. We just heard President Biden's first address to Congress. Our president seems like a good man. His speech was full of good words, but President Biden promised you a specific kind of leadership. He promised to unite a nation, to lower the temperature, to govern for all Americans, no matter how we voted. This was the pitch. You just heard it again. But our nation is starving for more than empty platitudes. We need policies and progress that brings us closer together.
Happy Saturday and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, May 1st. Happy May Day. People don't say that anymore. We used to dance around the maypole and all that stuff. I don't know if you young people, they don't know about that. Anyway, we got a ton of stuff to talk about. First of all, I want to thank Ryan McDivitt for being in here last week from Duke University. We were talking about the whole industry of dialysis and how much it costs. We're going to have Ryan back on to talk about the whole diabetic care industry and how much that costs. And then we got a couple other health segments coming up in that series. The next one after that, we're going to talk about how HIV/AIDS is still actually a problem in the African American community that's kind of been swept under the radar. And then obviously we'll bring back our COVID-19 experts that actually launched the show back in around this time last year. So we'll have some of those folks back in to talk about where we are with COVID-19. But in the meantime, you saw Tim Scott on the way in. He is the senator from South Carolina. My God, my Lord Jesus, help us. Val Atkinson and Dr. Nicloe McFarlane. What in the hell with our brother Tim Scott? The Republicans stuck him up there in front of the audience to be the response after Joe Biden, after his a joint address to Congress. I'm going to start with you, Val Atkinson. What the hell?
I'll tell you, I am so fearful for my good friend and brother, Tim Scott. This guy doesn't even realize that he's being used, I think. I mean, they could have chosen from, 49 other senators to give this address. They chose him. He's got to ask himself why. They chose him not to try to get black votes or to show to the black people that the GOP is okay on this racial issue. He doesn't even realize that the GOP is using him to go after moderate whites. They are using him so that moderate whites will say, well, the GOP is not that bad. They got this black guy out there saying there's no racism and that kind of stuff. So they ain't that. That's who they're going after. This guy doesn't even realize it. He either is an unwitting, accomplice of this or what they call a useful idiot. And I like to think it's the latter. He is really out of touch with what's going on. He doesn't need to go down this road. I understand in the South, we have, and I say we because I'm a native North Carolinian, we have a long affinity with the GOP because of the Emancipation Proclamation and who was in office at that time. The first free blacks that exercised their franchise and everything were Republicans. But that's changed. That's changed. A guy named Strom Thurmond used to be a Democrat. Those things change. And some people don't realize that. Tim Scott's in that bag. And I hope that he has an enlightenment moment and understand what's going on. Hopefully it'll happen before too long.
Well, Nicloe McFarlane, I know you got a lot to say about this.
Well, I have a slightly different take. It might even be an oppositional take, if you don't mind, Val. It's the idea that he's being used by the Republican Party. I would say that Tim Scott is quite self-selecting, right? That he knows exactly what he's being deployed through his GOP response, right? And he knows that his black skin, his black appearance, his black identity, right? He doesn't deny being black, right? That he knows that indeed he's actually, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing I want to say. Like, I think that I would have to differ somewhat from Val in that I believe that Tim Scott is actually not being used to the extent that you might suggest. I think, in fact, that he's self-selecting. He wasn't chosen. He is choosing himself in this particular incident, in this instance. And when I say that, what I mean is that he's quite aware of the fact that his Black skin, his Black identity as a South Carolinian is being deployed in order to counter the Democratic narrative, the liberal narrative, if you will. And if you have to look at it, there's an old adage in political science that goes, in a situation in which ends are largely attainable, means become all important, right? And I think that's important because he realizes that maybe, I think that Tim Scott is quite conscious of the fact of his lone senator, senatorial GOP status as a Black, as his Black senator. I think that he's conscious of it. And I think that when they mentioned and have invoked the notion of the Uncle Tom through the Uncle Tim hashtag that was trending all week long, I think what's important about it is to think in terms of, the process by which American politicians most easily enter into the mainstream is, in terms of Black politicians, is through the quote unquote Uncle Tom trope, right? So you have like these political tropes, or these literary tropes really that have translated into political tropes. You have the Zip Coon character, the ultra urban, almost comically so, slick city slicker character who is maybe, I think we would say he might be like, that might be an Al Sharpton, a Zip Coon, right? And then you might look in terms of a Jim Crow character, which would be like basically the masses of all Black people, just sort of like slow, not figuring it out. And then you have somewhere in between, you have this Uncle Tom trope.
Tim Scott.
Uncle Tim Scott, right? And if you think about it, all of our Black, with exception, so you have the bad nigger, right? You have, God, I'm sorry, guys, I said it. The bad ninja.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay, you have the bad nigger trope in politics. And the bad nigger trope has always been like good cop, bad cop, right? You have your Martin Luther King versus your Malcolm X. You have your Frederick Douglass versus your Martin Delaney, and so on, right? And so you have this constant ongoing tension between the good Black that we can work with versus the bad Black that we should never work with, and that the white, that the good Black actually triangulates against for the mainstream, for the benefit of the mainstream. And I think what we have to look at is the fact that Tim Scott is perfectly conscious, perfectly aware of his positionality in the political landscape, and that in so being, he's actually aiming himself at a majoritarian perspective. Remember, Martin Luther King was perceived as a Uncle Tom. Remember that Colin Powell was perceived as an Uncle Tom. Remember, Barack Obama has been perceived as an Uncle Tom. Yeah. And I believe on the Twitters, I heard something about Kamala Harris being perceived as an Uncle Tom. Now, this is not to in any way excuse Tim Scott's very self-conscious enactment of this particular political trope. Because remember, in a situation in which ends are largely unattainable, means are everything. And here's another thing I would add.
Well, hold on. Let me put it, hold it right there. We'll come back to you because we got a little bit
that sat beside the door.
Yes, but we got a little video issue with you, Nicole. So hang on tight and let your video catch up. I want to remind folks that you're watching The Deal with Ed Clark. That's Dr. Nicole McFarlane from Fayetteville State. That's Val Atkinson. And we started off talking about Tim Scott. And one of the things about Tim Scott that I would want to interject in here is that I hear what you say, Val, about being the useful idiot for the Republicans. I hear what you say, Dr. McFarlane, about him being certainly conscious of what he's doing. He knows exactly he's the only Negro that fits being a senator and a Republican, and he uses that to his advantage knowingly because he's the only one. He's taking full advantage of it. But what I would say is I'm afraid of how dangerous it is for him to take that position as the lone Negro. He is the most powerful Negro in the land. I would say that he's more powerful than Kamala Harris.
Nobody's listening to him. Nobody cares.
Hold on. Well, hold on a second. In that he is a senator, and Val, we have talked about this ad nauseum over the last 100 days of the beginning of the Biden administration about how one lone senator can make so much of a difference. And so the argument I will make here is that he has more power being a senator from South Carolina than Kamala Harris has as being the vice president of the United States, because he is holding hostage the George Floyd Justice Act, because he is walking around pretending like he wants to come to a consensus with other Republicans to do criminal justice reform and police reform, which is cynical to me, which I think is much more dangerous, that he is the Negro that can make an actual difference because he's a senator. Cory Booker can have a position, and we know what his position is. Tim Scott can pretend like he has a position that he's trying to help Negroes. And I think that what he ends up doing in the end is he scrapes Black votes away from the progressive cause. If, for example, they push him up to be a candidate in 2024, or they pretend like he has some reasonable leadership skills right now and is going to come to some sort of conclusion on police reform. So, Val, I'm going to turn back to you real quick, and then I'll get back to you, Nicole. What to you is the danger of Tim Scott being a senator with one vote? That's 100. There's 100 people in the United States that really run every damn thing, and he's one of the 100. That's what bothers me about Tim Scott.
Well, it bothers me too, Ed, but getting back to something you said earlier bothers me more. And that is whether or not Tim Scott is the originator of the narrative that he's up purporting, or whether or not he is echoing talking points from the GOP. You know, we can talk about all of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes and behind the doors. Tim Scott is not going to come up with any issue, any policy that really runs counter to what the GOP's main position is on policing, on race relations, or any of that kind of stuff. He's dead in the water if he tries to do that. He can't do that. If he wants to have a future in the Republican Party, there's a road already mapped out for him, and he will walk that road if he wants to be and get to anywhere in the Republican Party. That's what he's doing. He is trying to do whatever he can to gain the favors of the power structure in the GOP. So they will continue to call on him, and they will continue these things. The trick that he's trying to play is that he's trying to make some people of his own race think that he's really fighting this with tears in his eyes, talking about how he's been pulled over himself. And that he's really trying to get this George Floyd thing off the ground. And that, listen, before every meeting, I'll bet he has a conversation with someone. I don't know if it's Lindsey Graham, if it's Mitch McConnell, or whomever it happens to be. But the Tim Scott you see in front of us, his strings are being pulled by somebody else. And I don't like the puppeteer that I'm thinking that's pulling his strings, because they don't have my survival and progress at heart.
Yeah. So, Nicole, your video was lagging a little bit, so I wanted to make sure we got caught up. So back to you then. So you hear what I say. You hear what Val says. I hear what you say about him being self-aware. He knows what he's doing, so on and so forth. How dangerous is he to you? I know that we can minimize that, you know, he doesn't have any real power. But again, I do fear, because at the end of his rebuttal to the president, he brought out the normal trope, which was, I'm a God-fearing religious man, and started invoking all this religious imagery. And we've talked about this before. Black folks, some of us do have a sensitivity to the church, and we'll give folks the benefit of the doubt if you invoke the baby Jesus
Right.
enough. So what about that?
So I don't think that by sheer virtue of Tim Scott's status as a Republican, that he's necessarily any more dangerous than Charles Rangel, Adam Clayton Powell, or any other senator that really wasn't that, or you know, or any other, no, not senator, but
Politician,
congressperson,
yeah, congressperson,
politician in general that purports to John Conyers. I mean, just I mean, I could go on. Like, there's a lot of corruption, right? And there's corruption on the Black Democrats as well, right? And even though, you know, they let this amorphous they allowed Tim Scott to play this sort of, you know, Boy Scout character with this Pollyanna-ish perspective of politics, in which, you know, America is really not a racist country. It is that shining city on a hill and all that. You know, like, if there were a spook that sat beside the door, it would be like a Tim Scott. Let us not forget, right? Let us not forget. And we have to remember that, again, Bill, not only what Barack Obama was considered an Uncle Tom, and I think it was interesting, the hashtag Uncle Tim that was trending this week. I think it's a really interesting thing for us to look at, because it really does represent a spectrum of Black politician political trope, political leadership tropes.
yeah.
Like I said, everywhere from the bad nigga, the bad one, like, you know, Martin Delaney's to Frederick Douglass, or W.B. Du Bois to Booker T. Washington, or then you look at Marcus Garvey to W.B. Du Bois, right? So that these positionalities are very much interchangeable, because W.B. Du Bois could go from being the bad nigga to being the Uncle Tom nigga, right? And it depends on what the opposition perspective
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is all very relative.
Yeah. It depends on what the political climate is too. I don't want to lose this discussion, but we're coming up to a break, and I do want to visit some other stuff. I know that I think we're gonna be talking about Tim Scott more though in the coming months, because I think they're gonna keep trotting him out there. That's my whole point of starting the show today
Because
with
he was
him.
so successful.
Yeah.
And that's because his rebuttal was so successful. And it did resonate. And guess what? I went to Clemson University, and I know for a fact that Tim Scott's message will resonate with many Black people.
Yeah, and that's what my point was. Yeah,
Black Americans,
yeah. I get you, but I want to make sure we get our break in. So I'm gonna take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about Elizabeth City, North Carolina. We all know what's happened over the last couple of weeks there. There are protests going on now. Media's all over the place. They've refused to release the videotape. The family's only seen part of it. When we come back, we're going to talk about Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Stay right there. You're watching The Deal. We'll be right back. And welcome back to The Deal, our second segment. We had a very lively discussion in the first segment about our new favorite politician, Tim Scott from South Carolina, the junior senator from South Carolina, who uh, I, I try to not feel sorry for him because I do believe that he's playing a role and that he's fully aware of what he's doing. I don't like what he's doing. I don't like that he's in bed with the Republicans. You can have political beliefs or whatever. I'm not going to question whether or not he actually believes it, but his family went to Mother Emanuel. He was related to people who were killed by the gunmen in Charleston, South Carolina. That's what I don't like about Tim Scott. But we got to move on to more murder porn, Val and Nicole. More Negroes dead. And this time, another son of North Carolina. George Floyd was a son of North Carolina. Now we have Mr. Brown in Elizabeth City, who was shot in the back of the head by the police. But before we start talking, I do have a clip I want you guys to take a look at. So let's look at that, and then we'll start our discussion.
The release would create a serious threat to the fair, impartial, and orderly administration of justice. And number 7, that confidentiality is necessary at this point to protect an active internal and criminal investigation or potential internal and criminal investigation.
As it backs up, it does make contact with law enforcement officers. At this point, the car is stationary. There is no movement, and officers are positioned around the car. The next movement of the car is forward. It is in the direction of law enforcement and makes contact with law enforcement. It is then and only then that you hear shots. So what I would do is ask Your Honor to release the video, but delay that release for 30 days to allow the SBI to complete the investigation.
He was able to back up as these shots were coming into the vehicle. He was able to back up, turn the vehicle around, spin off across a vacant lot, and at that time, he was hit in the back of the head here, and that is the fatal bullet wound that was described in the death certificate as a penetrating bullet wound to the skull.
Val, Nicole, okay, another dead Negro at the hands of the police. This time, Andrew Brown Jr., apparently they were trying to serve a warrant for some drug charges. I'll start with you, Val. What's this continued bullshit with over-policing over drugs where you got to send multiple law enforcement folks for supposed manufactured drugs in a house? And then later on, we find no drugs in the car, no drugs in the house, and another dead Negro. What's going on here in Elizabeth City in Pasco-Tank County?
Well, the purpose of policing has to be evaluated. It has to be recalculated. It has to be done all over again. We are still running police departments from the initial purposing that started with slave patrols way back when. And it hasn't changed as far as the purpose is concerned dramatically since then. It has not changed. That's one thing. So whatever we do, it needs to be going toward that direction. My take on this, to answer your question, Ed, is when I saw the DA, DAs are prosecutors. The defense is on the other side. They are the exact opposite from the DA. The DA could have been accused of arguing for the defense when he asked the judge for a delay. Who are you trying to protect? The decedent? You're trying to protect Andrew Brown? No, you're trying to give law enforcement more time to get their lie together. As far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what you're doing. So they got this going. But the bottom line, the lawyer talked about it a little bit for Brown when he said the guy ran across a vacant field, then he was shot in the back of the head. Even if Brown backed up and the vehicle may have made contact with an officer. My question is that capital punishment? Do you get the capital punishment because you're in a vehicle that touches a law enforcement? To me, it's got to be sort of intent. The law enforcement official has to have his life in danger. The guy operating the vehicle must be trying to kill him intentionally. Then I could see a guy firing a weapon to protect himself. But it's hard to talk about self-defense when you're shooting somebody in the back of the head. Because you can talk about, well, I'm trying to protect my brother officer. He was in front of the car and I was afraid that he was going to run over him, so I shot him. No, it's getting back to the purpose of policing that started a long time ago, Ed and Nicole. It is to corral and get these people of color under control and let them know who the boss is. You may live in this community, as we said, but I run it.
Well, Negroes need to be controlled. Nicole McFarlane, I'm gonna ask you something a little bit different here. Say the tape is released. That we've seen tapes in a lot of cases. We obviously saw George Floyd die ad nauseum in this recent Derek Chauvin trial. We've seen Adam Toledo shot to death recently. We've seen Makia shot to death recently, right? You teach young people about media and the impact of media and on it. Is there a law of diminishing returns? Say you release the tape, but only show it to the family, only show it to the lawyers. Do we all need to see this?
Right.
Or, how many dead niggas do you need to see to know that there's dead niggas? I mean, not to be so crass, but
No,
I think we have to be. It's like looking at those images from when they used to lynch black folks, right? Are we just looking at lynch postcards at this point? Because we know it's happening. What is the net effect of seeing this so many times, Nicole?
well, that's the point, right? That there is a desensitizing effect over a period of time that has clearly occurred. I mean, you're not just a desensitizing effect, but the fact that, just even the notion of say their names cannot even be realized because there are too many names to say. There are too many names to remember. It seems like every news cycle, every 3 months, there's 5 more names to memorize, and the last 5 months kind of empty out of your head. And so while like I understand the crass rhetorical, the rhetorical effect, the sarcasm and the irony intended. We still have to keep in mind that, look, these are real people's moms, kids, fathers, brothers, sisters, cousins. They're us, and there's a tremendous amount of pain that is occurring, and that there's also that is simultaneously occurs alongside this insatiable desire for Black death. It's like you invoke the notion of murder porn, and it is absolutely true. There's a sensationalistic effect of this that I don't know if we'll ever get ahead of it. We've become so inured, so absolutely addicted to these news cycles. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some people who wake up in the morning and be like, who got killed last night? I wouldn't be surprised if there's people who wake up and they check, the news to find out what's the latest outrage to occur in terms of just what we're viewing. And not only that, but it seems as though this latest death, it seems like it has every hallmark of an execution, right? And so that's another thing we have to think about is the fact that we just don't even there's not even the notion of justice is a foregone conclusion. it's not going to happen, because if there was a justice system, these people wouldn't be dead in the first place. These people wouldn't, be illegally searched and seized and bodies taken into custody. If we had a certain, because again, like the whole notion of policing in America is the notion of slave catchers and keeping Black people subordinate, keeping African Americans in their place, and not allowing the full realization of humanity for such a vital part of American body politic. And so I'm concerned about just the net effect. I think that it is like a postcard of the alligator bait postcards that Florida used to sell. I think I wouldn't be surprised if there are people who are collecting these videos on their hard drives just to get off.
Well,
I mean, it's gotten that ridiculous at this
I
point.
have no doubt that is the case. The first, the two subjects that we've covered extensively this morning have to do with Black men, two Black men in very dissimilar situations, right? You have a Black man who is denying racism even exists, and then you have a dead Black man who most assuredly, and I don't care how many Black cops are on the Pasquotank County Sheriff's Department rolls, assuredly died due to racism, because this whole war on drug nonsense that we've been in since Val's favorite president, Ronald Reagan, and his wife, Nancy, just say no to drugs, and how they turned that into a system to ensure that Blacks could not prosper by putting them in jail for low-level drug crimes. We are seeing the zenith of that program, right? That we have made it so that we've had multiple generations of Black men who could not flourish, and then in fact now we're just killing them off. And it could be me or Val just as easily as it had been Andrew Brown, even if we don't have any drugs in our car, Val. And so I turn to you because I want to make sure we cover this ground before we have to take the next break. Let's go back to, like I said, now there's this bill percolating supposedly through the Senate. Tim Scott is supposed to be trying to get Republicans to come on to sign on to the George Floyd Act. Is this all just cynical in that we will never have a place here until brown people take over white people? Definitely. Do we just have to wait to 2050 when we're probably not going to be here, so our grandchildren will benefit from this, and that we're maybe just whistling in the wind, and that there's nothing that's going to happen until white folks are no longer in the majority?
Well, I don't know about that, Ed. So you got to take it a bite at a time, just like eating the elephant. And the bite that we're at right now has to do with the honesty and the forthrightness of these people looking at the George Floyd bill. The only one that really makes a lot of difference to me is the one that they're struggling over. That's qualified immunity. That's the key there, because once a officer knows that even if he's not convicted criminally, he can go to a civil court and be ruined. Him and his family can be ruined for life. And if that is what it takes to keep him from confusing his taser with his service weapon, if that's what it takes to stop chokeholds and that kind of thing, I want that in a bill. And I don't want people like Cory Booker, I don't want people like Tim Scott to come up and say, well, we got a deal and we got a piece of this and a piece of that. That ain't what I'm looking for. Having deals is what a lot of representatives and politicians do to give them talking points in their next campaign. That I was the one that sponsored the George Floyd bill, and now we have banned chokeholds, and I did this. But what happened to the qualified immunity? You let that go by. You didn't push that because that's what holds these police officers accountable. What you want to do is hope that a police officer says, well, let me not choke this guy so badly because I don't want my police department to have to pay any civil suits. It's not me. I'm stopping killing this guy because I don't want the department to have to pay. Is that the kind of bill we want? You got to be kidding me. So, I mean, I'm keeping an eye on the two Democrats that are meeting with Tim Scott to see what they're going to come up with. Don't come up with no Pollyannish kind of stuff with me, saying, well, we got half of this and we got a part of that. That's not going to get it. I want prevention. That is my key from this point forward. I don't want somebody punished after he kills another black man. I want the black man not killed in the first place. So if none of your bills helps out on prevention, it's not doing anything as far as I'm concerned. Volume, you're muted, Ed.
Yeah, Val, I tell you, less dead Negroes is where I'm trying to get. You know, I'm tired of having to even discuss this, but you see how things are connected. We started off talking about Tim Scott. We end up talking about Andrew Brown Jr. And Tim Scott, to me, is important because he is maintaining the position that there's no racism. How can he be the one to be the honest broker and negotiate any kind of bill that would hold the police accountable? You know what? Damn it. We are at a time for a break again. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Nicole's going to tell me why the first 100 days of the Biden administration actually means something, or if it does, and when in the world did we start worrying about the first 100 days of anything in the presidential administration? So stay right there. We'll be right back after these messages.
We don't want to miss an opportunity in our community to protect ourselves, especially since our community is disproportionately affected in a negative way right now.
And we've got to encourage those in our community to realize that we've got to look forward, and we've got to find ways to be much more trusting and engaging and recognize the importance of the vaccine in helping us defeat this incredible virus.
And actually, I've been dreading the little pinch of the needle. I didn't even hurt or didn't even feel it. This is just a win-win-win. And, you know, I would encourage everyone to take advantage of it. It doesn't take a lot of time or effort, and it doesn't even hurt.
You have a spot, get the shot. So that's what Aggies do.
I come to talk about crisis and opportunity, about rebuilding the nation, revitalizing our democracy, and winning the future for America. I stand here tonight, one day shy of the 100th day of my administration. 100 days since I took the oath of office and lifted my hand off our family Bible and inherited a nation, we all did, that was in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, after just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again.
Welcome back to the deal. This is our final segment. We have had two very lively segments, I would say. For the first two, we've talked about Tim Scott. We've talked about the continued murder of Black folks at the hands of the police, and what's going to happen or not happen with that, in waiting for the release of this tape from Pasquotank County, North Carolina. And we came back in from the break with our new president, Joe Biden. And he's talking about his first 100 days. So I'm going to go to you, Dr. Nicloe McFarlane, first. This whole notion of checking in after 100 days in the first place, why do we care about the first 100 days anyway? Does it matter? And then I guess beyond that, since we're going to play political pundits here, has Joe Biden got a grade from you for those first 100 days?
Okay, so let's start with the last question. I would give him a C, which is what I give students at midterms when I really haven't seen anything from them, and they can go up or down at this point. I don't know. So that's kind of just like maybe he'll go up to an A or a B, but he can also go down to an F. So I'm okay with that. So if we have to give him a grade, you can't give a grade. The idea really is that you can't give a grade after 100 days because the grade, the idea of the 100 days is a purely artificial construct that was developed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which he was a campaign promise that he made that he would pass the New Deal after the first 100 days. After that, it's like, because it was also, FDR, remember, he's our first mass media president, right? Our first real mass media president. Even, like there was news, there were newsreels, but really when Americans started tuning in for the fireside chats and really like listening to debates and campaign ads on the radio, that was a construct that came about because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then after Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Truman was his predecessor, his successor, actually then started speaking in terms of what he would accomplish and what he would do in his first 100 days. And since then, the media seems to have picked up on this concept of the first 100 days. And I think what happens is that new presidents use it as capital for what they can accomplish in these in the early part of their presidency in terms of building a agenda and creating a sense of political urgency for their what they want to become their hallmark programs. And so I think that we have to really think about, like, even in terms of what Joe Biden was saying in his address, had a lot to do with jobs. Really what he's doing is echoing a lot of what Franklin Delano Roosevelt echoed in his first 100 days promise. And I think instead of a new deal, there's been much to do about this Green New Deal. And I think this Green New Deal obviously is something that Joe Biden can never, ever openly acknowledge, right? Because he may miss out on the opportunity to attract centrist or right centrist and middle of the road Republicans to his agenda. I think it's important that we remember that it's just pure media circus that we even focus on anything that can happen in the first 100 days. Really all we're looking for when they're asking about a first 100 days agenda is how will the media highlight what a new president hopes to be their signature agenda, and give them maybe the focus of attention, highlight the attention on their agenda rather than the opposition party. And now that the first 100 days are over, what do? We pivot back to Trump news. We pivot back to Rudy Giuliani news. We pivot back to everything that's happening on the other side of the aisle. as far as the mainstream media is concerned. And
Yeah.
I really think that if we cannot not look at this notion of the 100 days and whether or not any president is successful 100 days, because it's simply impossible. And
Well, it's not enough time.
It's
Not enough time.
Yes.
And then Val, Nicole brings up a good point. It's an artificial construct. It does have some basis in history, in that, Roosevelt did talk about what he was going to do in his first 100 days. But we're 70 some odd years removed from that. And so Joe Biden, he starts out behind because there was no real transition. Trump still hasn't given up. Hell, they're still counting votes in Maricopa County, Arizona. What the hell is that? But beyond that, in 100 days, a lot of significant things have happened, and Biden did talk about those in his address. But I'm looking forward to what's going to happen in the next 9 months. Joe Biden has put a lot of stuff on the table. There's another $2 billion out there for the infrastructure, and then another maybe $2 billion for some other programs. Is there any hope that, in light of the fact, and we haven't talked about this, the new census results came out, so that may shift the House in representation, and the Republicans may be able to eke out some really thin majority in the House. What is the likelihood that the 100 days is just going to be just a marker in time, and not shit happens for the next 21 months until the midterms come up in 24? I mean, what's the reality here?
The whole business of the 100 days is like a red herring. It doesn't mean anything at all anymore to anybody. It's a media kind of thing. Now, the media has taken it over, and the media marks their calendar. Okay, what are we going to talk about during this time frame? This will mark 100 days for this new president here. Let's make sure we got somebody in his face asking him, what have you done? And And the media runs it now. I mean, presidents don't come out now and says, okay, chief of staff, make sure we got these things accomplished in 100 days. No, it's a media piece now, and they need to stop it. One of the things that I disagree with my colleague on about the grade level, she would give the Biden administration a C. I would give them an A. And the reason I would give them an A is because of what they had to deal with out of the chute. They came with no type of transition. They came in with just people denying that he had won altogether. And the biggest pandemic that we've had in 100 years, and you see where we are with that now. The economy is another issue that's doing very, very well. People didn't expect Wall Street to be doing this well with all the stimulus giveaways, and they are. But the most important thing is trust. People have a different feeling of trust with this administration, particularly our allies. They are saying things that they didn't say with the last president. And I think that's critically important. But getting to the last point you mentioned, Ed, about the census, there was a net 3 pickup for the Republicans, net 3 loss for Democrats. And I'm basing that on the way states voted the last time. We had 7 states to lose 1 seat. We had 5 states that gained 1 seat, and 1 state that gained 2, that was Texas. North Carolina, of course, was one of those states that picked up 1 seat. New York is going to be losing 1 seat, and could have avoided that had 89 more people made themselves available for the census. in the total count. 89. They would not have lost. So people now can realize through this how important it is. It's something that I said on my show last week, Ed. If Republicans don't take back the House, it's because they didn't try. Now comes RUCO v. Common Cause. That was a Supreme Court ruling that said gerrymandering is okay for political reasons as long as you don't have it involving race at all. So with all of these GOP legislatures around the country, if they don't take advantage of this new reapportionment and run up their numbers even more, for an example, in North Carolina, we'll have 14 congressional seats, not to count the Senate.
Right.
And we could be as bad as 11-3. I could see that very easily here in North Carolina. So again, we are going to have a tough fight on our hands to maintain or retain the House of Representatives after this census.
Yes, look, there's a lot in that, and I do want to probably talk about the census and redistricting in more detail in another episode. I do want to remind folks you're watching The Deal. That's Nicloe McFarlane. I'm Ed Clark, I think, and I think that's Val Atkinson. So, Nicole, I know you wanted to add to that.
Well, yeah, I know we're going to address redistricting in future shows, but that really, what that case does is it really greenlights the surgical precision, right, of gerrymandering that was issued in terms of the North Carolina districting, and I mean of voting suppression laws that were enacted, some 2018, 2017, something like that. But also I want to say that in terms of like, I'm willing as a teacher who's Val, you and I are both teachers, so we know a little bit about learning assessments and teacher learning assessments. And sometimes teachers have to get together and we have to norm each other in terms of what we see as, appropriate grading. So I'm willing to bring that C up to a B, right? So I've been normed.
Okay.
So it's not just a C, it's a B. I'll go along with that. I'm willing to say maybe I'm being harsh on the student, but. But yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that's fair that we have to really, we're gonna have to keep our eyes open in these next few years, because the Republicans, they've always got a trick up their sleeve. They've always got a Southern strategy. They've always known how to mobilize that white voting bloc and consolidate that particular demographic against the browning of American political interest. And I'm really interested to see how this next 9 months turn out. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. In the time we got left here, I don't want to run out of time. There's been a couple of things that I think helped Joe Biden get a better grade. And one of those is that he does have a Justice Department that actually is functional now. I want to look at a clip real quick, and I want you guys to tell me whether or not this is going to make any difference. This is going to be Merrick Garland, who should have been a Supreme Court justice, but is now heading up the Justice Department.
The Justice Department is opening a civil investigation into the Louisville Jefferson County Metro government and the Louisville Metro Police Department to determine whether LMPD engages in a pattern or practice of violations of the Constitution or federal law.
So that was Merrick Garland, and he was talking about the investigation in the Louisville Police Department, and obviously a lot of that is being driven by what happened with Breonna Taylor in the aftermath of that. But Louisville police, like a lot of police departments, have their own trouble. Again, like I said, I'll give Joe Biden a little bit better grade because he's actually been able to appoint people to do stuff. But will we see something come out of these investigations? We also know that the Justice Department decided to file charges against the 3 in Georgia who killed Ahmaud Arbery as well, which are good signs. Is that going to be at least one thing that we'll be able to give Joe Biden a better grade for at least resurrecting, some of these issues that had been swept under the carpet. So I did want to show that, because I think that does help. The other thing I want to cover ground on before we run out of time is, and I hate to bring this up, Val and Nicole, but Donald Trump hasn't gone anywhere. He is still very present. And what makes him very present is stuff like the fact that the feds raided Rudy Giuliani's office and apartment this week. And we'll take a look at a clip about that, and then we'll talk about that on the other side.
What did you think when you heard the news of the raid on Rudy Giuliani's home and office?
Well, two things came straight to mind. First is that I'm no longer the only one. And two, my parents always told me it's not nice to gloat, but Rudy, I told you so.
Rudy Giuliani is a great patriot. He does these things. He just loves this country. And they raid his apartment. It's like so unfair and such a it's like a double standard, like I don't think anybody's ever seen before. It's very, very unfair. Rudy is a patriot who loves this country. And I don't know what they're looking for, what they're doing.
Why are we having all of that Donald Trump stuff on?
So Val Atkinson, the reason why it's on here is because, not so much because of Rudy Giuliani, which I think Michael Cohen is saying that you were going to get your comeuppance because Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody else. He never has. I could have played a clip of Matt Gaetz as far as that's concerned, because the Vanity Fair yesterday released a story saying that there are transcripts of them trying to talk Donald Trump into giving a pardon to Matt Gaetz preemptively because they knew they had slept with a 17-year-old, right? But Trump didn't do it. But I would suppose he dangled it in front of Gaetz as long as he could to keep him on his side. The only reason why I bring Donald Trump back up is that we are not clear of the mess that's been made. And I am not satisfied that enough people have had to pay a price for the election of Donald Trump, including Donald Trump. So last big question of the day, will there ever be any real accountability for all the bullshit and nonsense that went on in the 4 years of what we call the Trump administration, Val?
I don't think so personally. That's just my opinion about it. And I think it's because number 45 surrounded himself with a lot of smart people, good lawyers and people who understand the system. He understands it very well. And if I go on past history, he's gotten away with it so far. I don't have hope. I don't have hope that this Giuliani thing or anything else is going to result in Donald Trump getting his final due on anything. And you got a lot of people out there who, some are Democrats right now in positions of power, who don't really want to pursue Donald Trump anymore. He's gone away and they're glad of it and they just want to get rid of it, wash their hands of it. So I'd like to see something happen because I think it would be justice for all of the crap he's done over his 4 years in office. I just don't see a clear way how that's going to happen. I think he gets away with it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Nicole, I give you the last word on that.
Well, to answer your question, will there ever be full accountability to Trump? And since you've already broken the profanity barrier, I'm going to just got to answer with the words of the late great Whitney Elizabeth Houston, and I will say hell to the gnaw. If that's okay with you, because she will. No, there's no accountability. There'll never be accountability. If there had been accountability when he was impeached the first time, he would have been removed from office. If there had been accountability, they would have invoked the 25th Amendment. Had there been accountability, I mean, there's so many things that could have been done to prevent the cronyism. He wouldn't have been allowed to appoint so many interim and acting heads of government throughout his administration. So no, there'll be no accountability whatsoever. And like I said, I like, the great philosopher Whitney Elizabeth Houston. The answer to that is hell to the no.
Well, I will take that as the definitive word on it because I agree with you too. Hell to the no. So, as we always do towards the end of the show, so you got to tell me something I got to look forward to in the coming week. So I'll start with you, Nicole McFarlane. What do I have to look forward to? In good, bad, indifferent, or whatever?
The news saying talking about something other than Biden's first 100 days, for crying out loud. There's other things happening in the world. Maybe something about those jobs, if you did a word cloud of his address, I think the word jobs would have been the whole thing. But yeah, maybe it might be successful. So maybe we have something to look forward to with Americans finally recognizing the inextricability of environmental policy and economic policy.
There you go. I hear you. Val Atkinson, same to you.
Well, I understand that New York is going to open back up full-fledged come July 1st. And that's going to be big for a lot of people who have made New York the center of their lives. They're going to go to plays and restaurants and shows and all kinds of things. It's going to be good not only for the economy, but for the social life of so many people. That is our social capital of the country. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. Well, I am looking forward to getting some normalcy. I'm also have some trepidation because I still don't trust a lot of people who are still trying to skirt not getting the vaccine, but we'll deal with that in a different episode. I do want to have a programming note. If you're catching this on Saturday, May 1st, on Sunday, May 2nd, join Val Atkinson and some clown named Ed Clark on Connections on Foxy 107, 104 here in the Raleigh-Durham market at 8 a.m. You can catch it streamed on the internet on foxync.com. So 8 a.m. So catch Connections with Val Atkinson and Ed Clark. Come back here next Saturday for another episode of The Deal. Of course, it'll be a lively discussion. Please start sharing this with folks, get other people involved. Keep sending me emails and feedback on. We've matured a lot over the year. This started because of COVID, because we couldn't go in the studio for Connections. And so Val and I didn't want to lose touch with the public. So we've grown the audience to include people not just in North Carolina, but around the world. I've gotten emails from people in South Africa, for God's sake. So anyway, in the meantime, what I always tell you to do, go do something good for somebody today, and then we'll see you next Saturday. You've been watching The Deal. Thanks a lot.